Well, the question today is Lance Armstrong still the poison ivy of cycling? Now, the reason why this has been raised is because Lance Armstrong has been running a camp with all of his old crew from when he was racing out there in the Mediterranean, and he invites these people to come and be involved in this camp. But what was the controversy was Mark Cavendish rolled up. And some people are saying, why is this guy associating with all of these old guys that were involved with the hot juice affairs back in the day? So let's roll an intro and let's have a bit of a discussion about, is Lance Armstrong still the poison ivy of cycling? Now, Lance Armstrong is a name that people know, not just in cycling, but outside of cycling, because he is the guy who juiced up and won all of the Tour de France. So he's a very, very well-known guy. A lot of people associate he's kind of the person who got pinged in all of sporting arena for juicing up, and it gave cycling a bad name. It gave Lance Armstrong a bad name, and he was stripped of all of his trophies. He kept the money, but and even in not so recent times, but a long time after all of this affair was settled down, the US Postal even tried to sue him, but that was settled out of court as far as I'm aware. But Lance Armstrong's moved on from those good old days of being the juice guy, and now he's involved in a lot of other businesses. He's got his hand in of all sorts of cycling companies and manufacturers, and he's got his own We Do podcast, The Move, and that is actually very, very popular and is doing very, very well. And now he's actually moving into running these camps. And what he did is he got all of the old guys there who used to race when he was racing, and they had like a bit of a couch and a sit down and a bit of guys and chin wagging and a little bit of relaxing and talking about this, that, and the other and all of these different things. Now, the only person who was there who's still racing is Mark Cavendish, and people have been saying, well, should Mark Cavendish really be rubbing his shoulders with these guys, because that stigma, will it rub off on him, and could that obviously affect his career and his relationship? And they're saying, hey, what are you doing hanging out with like those guys? Like, you know, they're not so well liked by some people regarding the cycling industry. Okay, well, let's have a look at what has changed, because the world has moved on. In 2022 now, there's a lot of things that were different from 15 to 20 years ago. And even what you're watching now, YouTube, has really become something quite different than it was in those days. And the way that cycling and a lot of sports were run was quite different. And if we go back to those days, what we need to realize is Lance Armstrong wasn't like this one person who was juicing up. Everyone else was clean as a whistle. No one knew what was going on. And poor old Lance Armstrong, got caught, and boom, that's history. What we need to remember is that this was a systemic thing in its day. And even the people that were involved in the same US Postal team as Lance Armstrong, they were the ones that actually dobbed him in. Lance Armstrong never got a positive test, ever. And he never admitted to it. It was only the fact that they basically pressured some of the other people who were in the team to come up and say, hey, yeah, look, guys, we're all juicing up. And that's how it happened. And when these people came up, it all came out. In the old days, they used to call it their little lunch bag. They used to have their little lunch bag, and they used to be giving it. It used to be handed out. It was like almost even open until they had to sort of be a bit more careful about it. So this was something that was systemic back in the day in the cycling industry. And everyone was doing it to some level. In fact, it was kind of, when the guys used to talk, the cyclists, if you weren't juicing up, it kind of was like, oh, right, you're not juicing, right? So it was the majority of people who were involved in this. But this stigma, or this label that Lance Armstrong has to wear, because we still make him wear it, all of these other people who are involved in all of this juicing, they don't get the same targeting and don't get the same label put on them as Lance Armstrong does. Now, let's be real, he did it. It was a very sophisticated way that they were doing it. And if you've watched any documentaries on it, they were paying off all of the inspectors. Guys were disappearing when they were supposed to. It was a very well organized affair. And this wasn't just a one-person thing. This was a team thing. There was a doctor who was telling them when to take it, not to take it, when to come off it. It was a science that they were doing. Now, Lance Armstrong, he was doing it, and he has to wear that badge. But I think that now we're 15 to 20 years on, should we really be still pointing at this label on Lance Armstrong? He hasn't been cycling for a long time. He's doing other enterprises, which obviously he wants to make money. He's an entrepreneur type of guy, and he's doing well. Yes, some of those things are related to cycling, but should we really be waving our little finger because one of the younger fellows who's still racing is now talking to or associating or being on a podcast and talking to all these guys? Should we then transfer that label from Lance Armstrong over to Mark Cavendish and say, hey, look, that's a little bit naughty? So in conclusion, this is my viewpoint. He was stripped of his titles. Yes, he kept the money. He's had to go for a number of legal cases, and he was down. He's got back up on his feet. He's got businesses. He's making a dollar for himself. I believe he's had bike shops. He promotes a lot of products on his We Do Move station. We know he's into rings, and he used to be involved with Hammerhead before it was bought by SRAM. He was involved with, and I think he's also involved in some bicycle companies as well. So we know that he's not out of the cycling industry totally, but let's face it, that's what he knows. That's something that he's an expert at. That's what he's known for, and he's making a living from it. Now, I don't really blame him for doing that, because everyone's allowed to make a living. He's over there. He's running a podcast. He's extremely successful, and he managed to organize all of these old claimed names from bygone years. These people that he had sitting on this couch were significant cyclists. And I think it was pretty good marketing by him. And I think he's pretty good at that sort of thing. And I think we should probably drop the badge that is stuck to him, that poison ivy badge that says, hey, look, I'm a juicer. And we should move on from that. I think people should move on from it. It was a long time ago. And what we should do is look at Lance, and we should say, hey, look, he's successful now as a businessman, as an entrepreneur, as a podcaster. He's getting people on his show, and they're talking about the Tour de France or whatever other race that's happening, and he's not cycling. So he's now working in a different environment. It's like someone leaving cycling and becoming a commentator for the races. Okay, he might have done something wrong while cycling, but that doesn't mean to say that he can't be involved with cycling. He's paid his dues, and now we've moved on. Well, anyway, guys, leave your comments down below, because I know as soon as you say the name Lance Armstrong, people get very, very polarized about this guy cheated, and, he should be paying for that forever. And then you've got the other guys go, hey, look, everyone was doing it. He was the one that just basically got caught. He was the fall guy. Let me know what you think down below. And anyway, guys, that's where I'm going to leave it for this vid, and I will see you next vid.